My math and science teacher bought those 2 knives
that's cool.
for $20. And I was like, holy, you can make knives and make money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hooked. People don't understand, like, custom knife makers are kind of a starving artist situation. I don't know how that exactly happened. I mean, my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas, and then he invited me up to build a knife. And then he was like, all right, kid, if you want to be a knife maker, you have to have your own knife shop. By the time I was in my 20s and 30s, you know, I was making high-end custom knives, but they're more collector's items. So when I started Montana Knife Company in 2020, I had been seeing, you know, the knife almost becoming less relevant to people and it being cheapened, like something, an afterthought that you pick up. I reached a level in the knife making game that very few do.
Is there a most overrated knife maker here in the United States?
I'm sure somebody would probably say me.
I doubt that. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's both an honor and a pleasure to welcome my next guest to the podcast. He was the youngest Journeyman Smith in the American Bladesmith Society at 15, which is fucking hard to believe, but awesome. The youngest Master Smith at the age of 19. He's the founder of the Montana Knife Company. He's also the host of the Josh Smith Show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Josh Smith.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. You know, I guess we've not really known each other, but I know you sent a blade quite a while ago now, and I certainly appreciate it. And I've, you know, seen your company and you pop up all over the place, kind of in a lot of the same circles that I run into. And it's just, you know, a pleasure to finally meet you and get to talk knives and kind of your story, which is unique and cool. So I appreciate you taking the time to come on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. To be honest, over the last several years, your show's been one of my favorite ones to listen to, and I'm not just trying to blow you here, but I really do enjoy, you know, the podcast, and especially a lot of the dog stories and stuff. You know, I
appreciate it.
I trained a lab in high school, and I've got a little bird dog now, but I'm not some great bird trainer or whatever. Yeah. And I'm also not a veteran, but I do enjoy a lot of those veteran stories and. Appreciate you having me on. I know mostly you have veterans on, but I'm not that. But I do respect the guys and gals that served.
I appreciate it very much. It's a pleasure to do it. It really is, and you know, having guys like you watch and support it is amazing. So thank you.
Yeah.
What's the last full book that you've read?
I'm in the middle of one right now. I'm to be honest, I'm not a big book reader, but I've kind of been through all the Jack Carr novels.
Yeah.
The one I'm in right now it's called The Psychology of Money. It's kind of boring as fuck, but it was suggested to me by somebody I respect. And I do try to, if I get a suggestion from somebody that I respect, like I generally try to learn, you know, so I've been listening to that, not reading necessarily. I travel enough that it's kind of nice to listen to some books.
What's is there a gist that you've taken away from it so far?
So far, I mean, I'm only partway through it, but it's kind of, it's talking about a bit of a measured approach to, and less of the try to get rich quick, but more of the consistency over time.
Yeah.
And just talking about, how to invest your money and spread out your risks. And it talks a lot about, like, Warren Buffett. The vast majority of his wealth has actually been through just making dividends in small chunks, not like the big home run story and going after the next Bitcoin craze or whatever.
I feel like that's good advice for anything, really.
Yeah.
You know, is the base hits approach. You know?
Yeah.
But that's good stuff. Psychology of money.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a little dry and it's a little whatever, but it is, I think the message behind it is, you know, pretty valuable for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think that's stuff that a lot of what they talk about and whatnot, like I wish you and I, before we started rolling, were talking about schools. Like I wish they'd teach more of that in school, you know, investing or help balancing your own damn checkbook.
Yeah.
It seems like kids graduate high school and they're immediately in debt, college or credit cards or.
Yeah, or they have no idea how to navigate anything financially. And I think civics and finances are two things that are woefully undervalued and undertaught.
Probably the most valuable, and we don't teach them.
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
What's something you wish you were better at?
Shit, everything. I think it's a little cliche, but just better husband and father. And I think I'm pretty damn good, but, my kids I have 2 kids in college and 2 still in high school. And I do often think about, like, it'd be cool to, not that I want to have babies, but to run back and be a parent again with the brain I have now versus in my early 20s. Yeah. I wish I was better at being motivated to work out more and stuff. My wife's absolute diehard. She's up every single morning and working out, and I was doing pretty good for a while. And then just a bunch of excuses, but kind of fell off. And at the moment, I'm fat and out of shape, and it pisses me off. But it's only my fault. Yeah.
If time travel were possible, where and when would you go?
Man, that's a great question. To start with, just back to the founding of our country. Watching, basically the Pilgrims land on the shores, and what did our country look like then before there were highways all over it and the humans fucked it up. And because I live out west, because I live in Montana, I actually take my kids hunting in the Missouri River breaks, and we'll sit in that. It's really, really rugged country out in eastern Montana. And we'll sit there, and you're looking down at the Missouri River. And I often, every year we do it, I tell my kids, like, just imagine right now sitting here and watching Lewis and Clark rowing upriver into this unknown rough country with Indians and bears and everything else, not knowing where they're going. And mapping that whole country and whatnot, the bravery, the strength those guys had, the mental fortitude to not turn around and go back or whatever. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. Stephen Ambrose, who wrote Band of Brothers, have you read that book?
I haven't. He also wrote, I think, Undaunted Courage too. Yeah. It,
such a good story, and agreed. Like, I can't even imagine the just the landscapes of what this country looked like back then. It'd be.
Imagine if you came home one day and you're like, hey, I was talking to the guys down at the bar, and we're going to put some canoes together, and we're going to row up this river for the next 3 years, and you just stay here and take care of the kids, and we may or may not return.
Yeah. Fucking balls of steel. I guess, at that point, what other option do you have, I guess, other than to just sit there? But, that's the thing, nowadays, like, there is no uncharted anything, really.
Yeah.
I guess you could say parts of Antarctica or the Arctic Circle, but what the fuck are you going to do there,
Yeah.
So
I was recently on a moose hunt with my son up in northern BC. In that country, though, there's been people flying, we flew float plane in and landed in it. There's been people there, but you do get a sense of what those people were going through. Because, walking through that brush and doing everything that we did for 10 days, it gives you kind of a respect for sure for those people. That the other time period, I've been to, like, the Wallace Collection in London, the arms and armor sections, like, of the Metropolitan Museum.
Yeah.
For being a knife maker, I love those arms and armor sections, and you see the armor that those dudes, one, just how they even made all that armor, and then two, think about the dudes standing in that stuff, which they generally look like pretty little people.
Yeah.
But to be like, hey, here's 1,000 sets of armors. You guys are going to go walk for the next, 7 months to go fight some war somewhere. Like I have that book, The Arms and Armor of Iran, and it's all Persian pictures of and explanations of Persian armor, and it's mind blowing when you look through there. And then also you get a sense of just how fucking brutal those people were. The maces, some of the ways that they had of killing people. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Hey guys, I want to take a minute to tell you about the Mic Drop Patreon, where you can get the real mic drop experience the way it's meant to be seen. You get completely uncensored, unfiltered, and uncut episodes with nothing held back, just raw, real conversations directly from me to you, without YouTube censorship. Plus, you'll see it days before anyone else, with early premieres and exclusive bonus content that you won't find anywhere else. You get behind-the-scenes access to the show, including pre- and post-show footage with me and the guest both in studio and on location, depending on what the guest is into and what we have going on. On top of that, we've got tons of Patreon-only perks, mic drop swag, access to exclusive merch, and the chance to submit your questions to be asked at the end of every episode. You'll also get a sneak peek at our upcoming guests, so you'll know who's in the studio weeks before anyone else. We're constantly releasing new features and dropping new content based on what you want to see. For our top tier members, you get the same mic drop challenge coin that all of my guests receive from the upcoming show, which will never ever be for sale. We've got quarterly merch that's sent out directly to you, a monthly Zoom call with me where we talk about whatever you guys want to talk about, and an active group chat where we all shoot the shit on a daily basis. All of that for just a few bucks a month to support the show. Right now, we're also offering a 10% discount off an annual subscription, which means that you get more than a free month. I want to say thank you to everyone who has already signed up. Your support means that we get to keep bringing you the content that you love. So if you haven't yet, hit the link in the description or go to patreon.com/micdrop and join the team. I'll see you guys in there. Thank you.
I have 4 dogs, and they've eaten all types of different food. And we recently found Team Dog, I believe this spring. So we've been on it for a year. Seeger was on it first, and Tiller was on it, and then we put the Goldens on it. And I mean, all the dogs eat less food. The dogs' coats are way better. Everything about Team Dog is, I'm very impressed. My dog trainer, Justin Allen, he uses it on all 60 dogs that are there for training. He's tried every single food in the game too, and they just stay super healthy on this Team Dog.
To me, there's such a lost art of craftsmanship in our world nowadays. If you look at the way shit was built, even 2,000 years ago, fuck it, for that matter, you could go all the way back to the pyramids. If we actually built them, who knows?
Yeah.
but going back to say, Roman Empire or Greek and Spartan era prior to that, just the shit that they made, not just intricate little things, whether it's engineering, architecture, fucking building things, but, swords, armor, jewelry, just the amount of talent that they had to make things, from nothing with very elementary tools and technology is fascinating. You could argue that, the technology that exists now is equally as impressive, just in a kind of a much more boring way. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it seems boring to us because we're surrounded by it and you don't see, the shit from 2,000 years ago really taking place. But the other thing it's hard to kind of wrap your mind around, I think, is, that ability to have all of that time. It's like there's so much shit going on. You're so distracted and, phones and TV. Think about, you can look at your screen time and see how much fucking time you spend on your phone, and yes, a part of that is running a business or being productive. But the overwhelming majority is just wasting your fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
Same with watching a TV.
Yep.
So it's like if you took that time and practiced anything,
you just did one thing.
Yeah. Fucking anything and fill that time, you're going to be really fucking good at it. You know? So,
I went to the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, and got to tour that and the arms and armor sections and stuff there. But the palace, the castle or whatever itself, with the sea walls that they built along the Mediterranean and the 1,000 years or whatever that they ruled and whatnot. But it was the first known, from what I was told, the first known sewer systems in a city where they would basically with a bucket of water flush the shit out and it would go down the sidewalks. But it was in little trenches on grade, off into the Mediterranean or whatever. But you see the construction of those, the Blue Mosque that's there in Istanbul and whatnot. You stand there and you think how in the hell in the 1700s or 1600s did they build this shit? It's mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating and impressive for sure. And kind of sad that, you know, most people have no idea how to fucking do anything anymore. You
Right.
know, but
Can't build a doghouse.
yeah, yeah. Do you have a favorite quote?
I do. I wrote it on the board in our shop 3 years ago. It's still sitting there to this day. Doubt kills more dreams than failure ever will. I don't know who said it. Yeah. I saw it somewhere and I wrote it on the board. I wrote that on our board when we kind of were getting this company going. And, you know, you see a lot of people quit things because they fail one time or something doesn't work. But a lot of times by failing things, it just teaches you something. But if you have doubt in your ability, or if you have doubt that you're ever going to succeed, generally people don't even get started and they don't even get the chance to fail.
Yeah.
You know, there's doubt in everything. I have doubt in myself all the time a little bit, but you have to push that aside and push past it, you know. Yeah. I've definitely had plenty of failure, but I've learned a lot from those things. So I like that quote.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love it. Do you have an EDC? I imagine you carry in Montana.
I don't necessarily carry into stores and stuff. I have a SIG P365. Generally, I have, my wife has a pistol in her car. I've got a pistol in my truck. You know, I've debated back and forth. It's pretty damn safe in Montana generally. Every now and then I will carry if it's a big, maybe public outdoor function where there's lots and lots of people and it seems like there's a chance of fuckery. But yeah, I'm not generally too worried about my safety, but I do keep a pistol in the truck for sure.
Do you give a shit about ammo, or do you just take whatever? Like, do you carry a specific carrying ammo?
I don't. No, I mean, I'm friends with Nozzler folks. They've been really, really good to us, and they're just super nice people, and they send me ammo for pretty much anything I need. So
that's cool.
Yeah, but I don't get too nerdy and down the rabbit hole of some of that stuff, honestly.
Yeah. Morning routine wise, what time do you get up, and what's the first 3 hours look like?
Well, that leads back to the need to get better, or what I want to be better at. But usually we're up around 5:30 or 6. My wife gets up a little bit early. She has a little morning routine, which I really respect. She gets up, she does a little writing, she does a little reading. She's kind of got her little quiet time that she likes, and then she's always we have a home gym in our basement, Sornex setup. She's usually down there about 5:30. And when I'm doing well, I'm down there kind of with her. We've got a couple basically squat racks and a exercise assault bike and treadmill and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
But like recently my back's been jacked up, and so I've been kind of taking it a little bit easy, which is why I'm out of shape and fat. But otherwise I get up and I'm a big coffee guy, make coffee, and then try to cook my kids breakfast. And then honestly, this is where I kind of struggle, is I tend to get straight into my phone, straight into emails, DMs. I struggle actually to find a good balance. I appreciate so much like people's engagement with our company, and part of that, like that fear of failure or trying to stay ahead of the game, I'm constantly trying to get back to everybody that DMs or emails or whatever. And honestly, it's gotten a little out of control. I'm starting to try to make some adjustments where maybe even not answering comments. You just sit there so much on your damn phone.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, not that you're asking for my advice, but I will say, I found myself in that same position, and by hiring somebody to do that, but all of it, you know, so like for emails, you know, text messages, except from a very small group of people, and emails, like somebody else goes through all of those, and I only get sent what I am the only person that can answer it.
Yeah.
And I will say that it's fucking life-changing, absolutely life-changing. I mean, it makes you feel almost lazy.
Yeah.
You know, but like the amount of extra time I have now to either not think, you know, and give my fucking brain a break, or focus on things that are actually way more productive than something like that. Not that it's not important, but to me, you know, the adage or the mindset of like, if it's not something that has to be me doing it, it's just going to be better for you to have somebody else do it, at a certain point, I mean, when you're first
we did hire an EA, an executive assistant, and she's in my email, which has helped a ton. But I don't have anyone in like the DMs and all that stuff yet. And I often think about, like, when I grew up, we didn't have cell phone service anywhere, like none in our small town until I went to college. And I think about often, like, my dad would leave for work at 5 or 6 in the morning and tell my mom he'd be home for dinner at 7, and sometimes he'd roll in at 9:30 or whatever. Zero contact with society whatsoever. And now, when you run a business between a couple email addresses, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's kind of insane how much time you can spend just trying to respond to every damn platform.
That's why I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd hire somebody. I mean, to me, it's worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely it is. If there was a fictional place that you could live, where would it be and why?
A fictional place? Alaska. I'm not a big fictional guy. I like less people and lots of hunting.
Yeah. So maybe.
What about you?
Probably the Wall from Game of Thrones.
That's pretty cool. Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of people, a lot of good hunting. It's cold as fuck all the time, which I like.
Yeah, that was a cool ass show.
Yeah, I'm not big into shows. Like, I don't watch a lot of them, and I resisted that one because so many people watched it, which, whatever, maybe is dumb, or petty. But holy shit, like, that's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Maybe the best one. I really. Same. Yeah, I mean, that thing's fucking incredible.
Even just the graphics with shit they did with those dragons, and it's kind of bonkers.
Yeah. I just, to me, the
fact that they killed some of the most important people right away was like, oh, this.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The fact that it's so unpredictable, like just when you think what's going to happen, it knocks you right on your ass, which I really like. But
yeah, I did too.
Are you originally from Montana?
Pretty much. I mean, I was born in Colorado, and my folks moved there when I was 6 months old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Siblings?
One sister, she's 2 years younger. She lives out in Seattle.
And did you grow up in the Missoula area, or where?
East of there, 100 miles, or 80 miles in Lincoln. It's most people know it as the home of the Unabomber.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
Ted Kaczynski?
Ted had his cabin on, actually, my best friend's ranch. His grandpa, Josie's grandpa, gave him that spot to build his cabin, and it was on the same property. Our gravel pit growing up was on that same ranch. So like my dad and I would dust him out with the dump trucks, like on the dirt road. He was always pedaling his bike up and down that road.
Oh shit.
So we were surprised we never got a package.
Yeah. Fuck, that's wild.
Yeah. Old Uncle Ted.
What was growing up there like in terms of just general upbringing, school, sports, any impactful moments?
It was a small school. We had the biggest graduating class ever at that school at that point, and it was 20 kids. So real small town, logging and mining, some small ranches. I grew up in an excavation company. We had, my folks started from absolutely nothing, and when I was a baby, and grew their excavation business up. So, when I grew up running backhoes and excavators, working for my dad in the ditch, hauling pipe around, and eventually graduated up to actually like doing full-blown jobs, and we had a couple employees. And the most formidable part was probably just working with my dad and learning the value of hard work and work ethic. And my dad's the hardest working guy I've ever seen. Just disciplined that way. Probably pretty unbalanced. I mean, work was our life, for the most part. But played basketball, played football a little bit. Little League baseball, that's where I actually met the guy that started teaching me to build knives. He was my Little League baseball coach.
Oh, no shit.
Yep.
What, was that something that you just kind of stumbled on, being one of his players and were interested in it, or was there a catalyst?
Yeah, it was kind of one of those. He was our coach, and he was an outfitter there in the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and worked on a ranch too. And he was kind of learning to make knives at that time, and he would bring some of his hunting knives to practice and show the parents. And being an 11-year-old kid that liked to fish and hunt and stuff like that. I thought they were awesome, you know, and I don't know how that exactly happened. I mean, my parents bought me one of his knives for Christmas, and then he invited me up right after that Christmas of 1992 to build a knife in his shop. And I think it's probably because I asked so many questions about it.
Yeah. He was like, will you shut the fuck up and just come watch?
Well, that's kind of, yeah. I mean, and really, I built a knife or two in his shop, and then, you know, he's, ended up being an amazing knife maker. You know, I got really lucky that way, but pretty gruff guy, you know, and he was in the Marines and big guy. And pretty much I built 2 knives in a shop, and then he was like, all right, kid, if you want to be a knife maker, you have to have your own fucking knife shop. You know? Yeah. So his nice way of saying beat it.
Yeah.
And so I had a lawn mowing business, and so I went and bought a belt grinder, and I put it in my dad's shop and started making a mess at his shop. And I would still take that stuff up to Rick's house, and he would kind of critique it and help me here and there. And I just kept buying equipment. And finally, when I was like 13, I was making, I think, enough of a mess in his shop and almost on the verge of burning his shop down a couple times with heat treating oil and a torch and shit. So he enclosed a lean-to out in one of our machine sheds, kind of uninsulated. And he actually built the benches at the height he thought I would be someday. So for the first 3 years, I had to stand on a milk crate at my own belt grinder. He didn't want to have to rebuild the benches. I think he thought, I'll build this. He'll make knives for a year or two and quit, and I'll have a workshop at the benches at the height that I need them.
Yeah.
And I just kept going, honestly, and got better and better, and kept getting critiques from Rick and other knife makers, and started going to knife shows. And
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you made your first 2 at Rick's shop?
11.
11. Wow.
Yeah, and I presented those at my my science fair project I did like a heat treating project, and my math and science teacher bought those 2 knives
for
$20. And I was like, holy shit, you can make knives and make money.
Yeah.
Like, I'm hooked.
Yeah.
You know, someone will pay you to do this. This is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And
so what material, I mean, how were you making them at first? Like completely from scratch, or were you getting a shape and?
No, completely from scratch, but it was stock removal. So I piece of flat bar stock and, you know, draw a design and then scratch it out on that steel, and then basically either bandsaw or grind out the profile. Yeah. And then grind, you know, an edge on it. You know, I did a terrible job on those, but.
Were you heat treating them at all? Or?
Yeah. That's where things would get sketchy. It's probably good my dad didn't see a lot of things, because, like, you have to heat up your oil when you heat treat. And I would use, those were 1095 steel blades, and so you'd use automatic transmission fluid for heat treating them in it. Yeah. And you had to heat it a little, but all oil has a flash point, and I was just heating it with a rosebud torch. And then the top would catch on fire, and then I was trying to get the fire out. And I would steal my mom's cake pans out of her kitchen and put oil in them out there. And I had some close calls out there for sure doing that. But you would quench the blades in those pans of oil and stuff.
I mean, how hot are you having to get that oil?
Like 130, 140. But it'll flash it. I think about 170 or 180. And
does it make sense or not make sense to use like a turkey fucking deep fat fryer and boil it from underneath?
You could. I mean, what I ended up doing much later in life was, welding together like a bigger, heavier steel tube and with a lot of oil in it. And then I usually just put like a hot bar of steel in it, and it just kind of sits there and, kind of almost like boils. Yeah. Instead, I was, at that point, I didn't know anything. I was using a torch on the top of the oil. So I was superheating the top 16th of the oil. Yeah. And everything below it was cold, but then the top was catching on fire. Yeah. Just a lot of things you don't know when you're 12.
Yeah, no shit. And luckily it didn't burn your house
down.
The
drill press was what almost killed me. I mean, I had trying to drill holes in blades, and I wasn't strong enough or knew how to really clamp things well. And I had already had the damn knife sharp, which I shouldn't have. And then it would catch and rip it out of my hands, and it fly off and stick in the wall. And there's still marks in my dad's wall from blades hitting it.
Yeah.
It's amazing I survived.
Yeah. All right. So you make the first few knives. He kicks you out. You start doing it, and your dad, builds a shop. What was the process from those early days, the first couple that you kind of cobbled together, versus the journeyman aspect at 15?
Yeah. Like, Rick was smart enough to see that he could see that I was kind of maybe not going to quit this, and so he suggested, he's like, hey, you should join the American Bladesmith Society. It's an organization that just there to kind of help preserve and promote kind of the art of the forged blade. And if you join that organization, you have to be a member for a couple of years, and then you're eligible to test for your journeyman test. And so he's like, hey, if you do this, you could become a pretty young journeyman or master down the road. And so I joined, and it was also somewhat of a good networking tool. People have to remember that was before the goddamn internet. So you weren't learning YouTube shit, Instagram, whatever. So, by being a member of that organization, you get some newsletters and stuff. I was getting like Blade Magazine and whatnot, but early on I started going to knife shows. So the first knife show I went to, I turned, I think 13 or 14. It was in Eugene, Oregon, and Rick picked me up. He had a big Chrysler town car, big, huge boat of a car. And him and a buddy of his, knife maker, picked me up. And we got to the end of my parents' driveway and getting ready for this 14-hour drive. And he turned around and he's like, anything you hear or see on this trip or in this car stays on this trip or in this car. Your parents think I'm a respectable person. Basically, shut the fuck up, kid. Yeah. And because they were, in their late 20s, early 30s, pretty hard going, party fun dudes, and said a lot of shit that I hadn't heard before. And I sat in the back of that car, but we went to that Eugene, Oregon knife show, and that's really where I got to meet a lot of their knife makers. And I just started asking people how they did stuff. And the knife community was really sharing. Very few people were like, hey, beat it, kid. They were very sharing guys. And I just wanted to try to catch them. And little did I know, the guys I was learning from were going to actually be some of the best knife makers in the world someday. Oh, wow. I just got lucky. I wasn't working with Billy Bob that was making a few knives in his lean-to. Yeah. Like, these guys were on track to become great. So the whole time I kept trying to catch them, they were getting better. Yeah. And I went to the Atlanta Blade Show when I was 15. I went to the New York City Knife Show. Like, I traveled and went to shows, and I just kept trying, honestly, to get their approval. And they were dickheads. I mean, they weren't nice to me as far as, like, I would show them knives that I thought I did a really good job on, and they would constantly just tell me, like, well, this isn't good enough, and you didn't do this right. And I think I was 20 years old before I heard one of them say, hey, that's a pretty damn good job. No shit. Yeah. At times I remember like going home crying to my parents, like, I can't ever do anything right. Just feeling sorry for myself and being a baby. And they're like, well, they're trying to help you, do better. And
don't suck so much.
Yeah. And other knife makers in the country, Harvey Dean, he's down here in Texas. There was a bunch of older legends, but I would call these guys. I was 16, 17 years old. I would call them before every knife show and ask, well, knife makers generally are also broke, so we'd share rooms at shows. Yeah. And so I would try to call the best knife makers I could find to ask them if they wanted to share a room. And then I would just pick their brain. Yeah. And it was funny because even though I was young, a bunch of these 50, 60-year-old knife makers for some reason really liked me. And so I would room with them, and I would just hand them my stuff and say, hey, show me what I need to do better. And they'd tell me, and then I would try,
Yeah. Thinking of that then versus now, like the thought of like a 15-year-old boy staying in a hotel room with a 60-year-old fucking man that he's not related to. Yeah. It's a little dicey.
Yeah, it was never even a thought back then. Yeah. And every now and then it was a matter of like 3 or 4 dudes sharing a room together, and you build the wall in the middle of pillows and be like, don't fucking cross it.
It's fucking wild, man.
But yeah, it was an amazing time. And, we would, stay up in those hotel rooms until 2 or 3 in the morning with 12 knife makers would be in the room, and they'd be having beers and they'd be showing each other what they did. And it was a sharing, like they were all learning from each other.
Yeah.
And I was in that room just soaking up information.
Yeah.
It was a cool time because it was before the internet. You had to share and learn. And it was neat that community didn't try to hide what they learned.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be like, hey, Mike, check out what I did.
Yeah.
Fuck, how'd you do that? And then you'd go home, but then you'd level it up.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, oh, damn, how did you do that? You know?
So, I mean, I assume that it's less that way now with the internet. And I mean,
I think so. I think that knife community is generally still pretty good, and there's still shows, but it's a little unfortunate that the internet took away the necessity for a show.
Yeah.
You know, if you wanted to meet a customer, or if you wanted to buy a knife from your favorite knife maker as a customer, you had to go find them.
Yeah.
And you got the chance to hang out in the bar in the Waverly Hotel in Atlanta and have beers with your customers and get to know them on a personal level.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot less of that, but it's in a different way. Now they can follow you on Instagram and see what your kids are doing and get a sense of your life every day. And in a way, there's benefits to that too.
Just order shit from you, drop ship wise or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, from a technology standpoint, is there a huge difference between what most knife makers are doing and others? I mean, like, seems like there's only so many ways you can do it, right? I mean, obviously there's different materials and whatever, but it is like, if you look at kind of all the bigger names within, let's say, the military, law enforcement, tactical community of knife makers, like, is everybody from your perspective doing it fairly similarly?
Yeah, fairly similar. I think there's a few differences that are key. You know, one, are you making it in the U.S. or not? Like that's a big one, right? And then there's some corners you can cut and some things you can do to try to, you know, everybody's trying to race to the bottom of the price barrel, and that's where when we came out, I was never going to try to win that race because that's a tough one to win against the big guys. It was going to try to do a few of those things that I do think matters to make your quality better, and the price is going to be a little bit more, but you're going to get like edge geometry, heat treating, the right steels, just a few, and then frankly, just standing behind your product. You know, when someone sends us a knife, we'll sharpen it and send it back to you at the latest the next day for free. You know, so I think that's where we also win over some people.
Yeah. So I guess in that same kind of vein, like as a prospective customer, you know, how are you approaching getting them to buy your product versus any of the other ones, or is there anything other than brand? I mean, if everybody has similar customer service policies, is at that point just like whoever you like their brand better? Or?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. I think my background has been a big advantage compared to a lot of the other big knife companies, because there's really no other knife companies that I know of that are being run by an actual master bladesmith that actually knows how to build knives, that actually isn't like the CEO of most of these companies couldn't make a knife to save their life. They don't hunt with them. They don't use them. There's some things that definitely make us different, like in the Montana Knife Company brand. And everything that we were talking about before as a kid was Josh Smith knives. That's like a custom high-end, you know, but by the time I was in my 20s and 30s, you know, I was making high-end custom knives for, you know, I mean, built a sword for $30,000.
Oh, wow.
You know, most of my knives were $2,000 to $5,000 a piece. That's a high-end. I reached a level in the knife making game that very few do, but they're more collector's items.
Yeah.
So when I started Montana Knife Company in 2020, I had been seeing, you know, the knife almost becoming less relevant to people, and it being cheapened, like an afterthought that you pick up. What really bothered me the most was, you know, for 30 years, I've had guys, you know, like yourself walk into my shop and be like, hey, can you fix the tip on this knife or sharpen this knife? It was my grandfather's. He was in Vietnam. or he just carried this knife every day in his pocket. It's the only thing I have of him. Thousands of knives I've sharpened for people. And now all of a sudden, in the last 10 years, I started seeing the replaceable blade, and specifically in the hunting market, the replaceable blade come along because guys were too goddamn lazy to learn how to sharpen a knife.
Yeah.
And so they started throwing blades away. Well, when you're 25, 30, 35 years old, you're not thinking it when you're using a tool about passing it down. You're just using a tool, right? Well, you go on a cool hunt in Alaska or Canada or whatever. You train dogs and you're just this middle-aged guy training dogs and doing whatever, and you're carrying a pocket knife. You're not thinking about it. But someday there's going to be a grandkid go, oh, my daddy was this SEAL, or my grandfather was this SEAL, and he did this cool shit, and he trained these dogs, and the only thing I've got left of his is this pocket knife. It's going to mean something to somebody someday, but instead we're throwing shit away. And especially, like, are you going to pass down that knife that's made in China? Like, if it's made in China, it probably doesn't have a lot of value to it, you know?
I couldn't agree more, and I think that's the difference between something worth passing down versus not, is like, does it have a story behind it?
Yeah.
You know, if it's some mass-produced shape that came from overseas and somebody just fucking polished it up quick and fucking threw it in a box, it's like, well, who gives a shit?
Right.
You know, whereas, you know, somebody born and raised here has a cool story, you know, built a custom fucking knife for you and you've used it for, you know,
right,
decades. Like, yeah, that's an heirloom. I mean, same with like women and cool fucking skillets or, you know, certain utensils in the kitchen. Like, you know, I remember my grandmother actually was getting ready to throw away this. It was like a kind of like a pressure cooker. It wasn't, but it was a pot similar to that.
Like a cast iron pot or something.
Yeah, that her grandmother gave her. And she, like, at this time, she's like 92, 93, and I was putting something away for her in her garage when I was home visiting her. I think it was the last time I saw her, actually, before she died. And I was like, the fuck is that? You know, she's like, oh, it's just trash. You can throw that away. And I was like, what is it? She's like, oh, it was a pot my grandmother gave me. I was like, why the fuck would we throw that away? I was like,
right.
No. So I took it, you know. She's like, you're just going to throw this away? And, you know, so... yeah, it's just stuff like that I think is important, you know.
My mom has probably 30 or 40 cast iron skillets that were all passed down from, actually, I think it was a family friend, like in my grandparents' time period, like an old black guy.
Yeah.
And he had this ancient old black guy had this whole cast iron skillet set that he'd given to my mom's grandma, and then my grandma gave it to my mom.
Yeah.
And I always say, as men, generally traditionally we've passed down knives and guns.
Yeah.
You know, maybe a watch or maybe, you know, our artwork, jewelry, cars. But generally when you go out in society, you walk into a store, you walk into Target and tell me what's made in there not to throw away.
Yeah.
You know, everything these days. I mean, hell, our furniture used to be made to even pass down.
Yeah.
And generally if people buy furniture at IKEA and it's a 7-year shelf life, you know?
Yeah.
The other aspect of that too is the knife, you know, and again, with hunting specifically, you know, people will spend several hundred, actually $1,000 on just the clothes they wear, a base layer and, you know, different weight pants for different weather and rain gear and all this shit, moisture wicking, this and that, and, you know, microfiber technologies and all this shit. And they'll spend a ton of money on their optics and they'll build a long range rifle, even though they hunt in the freaking woods in Pennsylvania and shoot 100 yards, maybe. You know, they spend all this money and then they'll pick up a $39 knife at Costco. But of all of your gear, when you go hunting, the only thing you really need is a knife and a gun or a knife and a bow. You take an animal down, you need a knife. And the other part of that is it is a part of your actual survival kit. I mean, shit goes south, you're gonna need a knife, you know. And it bothered me that we started, you know, you look at hunters, a lot of these gear nuts, they're counting ounces, they're paying attention to every single piece of their gear from their boots all the way up, and then their afterthought is a knife, of which is one of the items that they may actually need to depend on, you know. Yeah. So we're trying to change that a little bit, and you know, our hunting knives are $200 to $300 or $400. You know, it's not cheap, but it's also not
thousands.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think I'd rather, if you don't want to learn how to sharpen a knife, I'd rather you send that to us once a year after season, let us sharpen it for you, send it back, and someday you're going to be like, God, I've had that knife since, you know, for the last decade. I've done 30 damn animals with that thing, and all of a sudden it's kind of got a story.
Yeah.
You know,
it's got some guts patina on it a little bit.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the sharpening component for your average listener out there that isn't going to have a grinder or a band, belt sander. I mean, whatever. I'm not assuming to know how you sharpen them at your shop. I'm assuming though that there's equipment that most people, it wouldn't make sense for them to invest in.
Sure.
So for that, like, are you a strop guy? Do you like the Lansky style stuff? Is it more of a like the sanding discs or wheels that you just fucking roll on with the magnetic fucking edge placer or whatever?
Right.
Like, what would you recommend?
So this is where buying a high quality knife, it starts with actually the knife that you have. You know, people will bring me stuff and be like, I can't sharpen this thing. I suck at sharpening. And then I look at it and it's like, well, it's a shit steel. It's super thick. The edge geometry is crazy thick. It was never made right in the beginning. And then you've tried to sharpen this thing over the years and it's just this bull-nosed round edge, right? When you sharpen a knife, you're taking steel off of the blade, right? You're actually grinding steel off of that edge at a really fine level. And so, one, it starts with the edge geometry of that blade. That's why our blades, you look at most of our blades are quite thin. They're thin behind the edge, which is going to make it, one, it's easier for them to pass through material when you're cutting, but then it's going to also be easier. There's less to contend with back there for a stone when you're sharpening. And then it is the kind of steel, you know, there are steels out there that will hold an edge longer than ours out of a box when you look at it like a wear resistance, but then they're going to be an absolute bitch to get an edge back on. Yeah. And so when you select a steel as a knife maker, you have to select a steel that's going to be wear resistant, it's going to be tough, but it's also not going to be impossible for the customer to maintain themselves.
Yeah.
So with all that being said, once you have the right blade, it depends a little bit on the situation. If you leave the house, that blade's smoking sharp, and you know you shoot a couple pigs or an elk or something like that, and you're partway through and you're feeling like you need a little touch up, you know, we actually did a little packing sharpening stone with Work Sharp. It's just like a 600 grit diamond on one side, and it's just a small little, probably 5-inch long stone that's super light, and that's just meant for a quick touch up in the field. To kind of get you through whatever you're doing. I always suggest people have like a bench stone at home that's a little bit heavier, maybe a couple inches wide, 8 inches long, 10 inches long. And you know, you may even want a couple grits, like a 220 grit stone for actually just doing work. Like you need to reset this edge entirely, or you got to really move some steel. Start with that and then transition down to like a 600 or an 800 grit. You refine that edge, and then the strop, like a leather strop, is kind of just those final passes to kind of align that burr on the edge of the blade. You know, for people to imagine what I kind of try to correlate this to is if you look at an edge of a knife under a microscope, a proper edge, like a working edge for rope or hide or hair, stuff like that, will actually look like a saw under a microscope. There's little microscopic teeth. And as you use that blade, those teeth are actually grabbing and ripping at whatever you're cutting. And over time, those teeth, like on a saw, they start to dull out, they start to round over, and eventually those teeth entirely go away and it's just slick, right? So when you sharpen, you actually need to kind of rebuild that saw edge, that wire edge. And depending on the use, you can make that burr a little heavier or a little bit finer, right? If it's a chef's knife, something in the kitchen, maybe you're wanting it real fine. And I have YouTube videos on our YouTube that kind of explain this stuff. But you start putting that in that context, people can start to visualize what they're looking for.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the powered stuff, like the powered belt grinders and stuff that people can buy, because I've seen people bring some of our stuff back and they're They take way too much off. They get way too aggressive with a rough belt. That being said, if you have some knives that have been passed down and they're super thick and heavy, those actually can be probably the best way to get a decent edge back, because you frankly need to grind some steel off to get things reset.
Yeah. What about, so it sounds like microscopically, even normal blades are kind of serrated. What about like full-blown serrated blades? Like those seem like they would be impossible to sharpen.
Yeah, they pretty much are. I mean, that's we don't actually build any right now. To even do a serrated blade, you have to have a serration grinder. It's about $600,000. We'll probably have one in a couple of years. Certain jobs, people like it for cutting some rope and stuff. My argument is, you know, especially for like the military guys, I think you're absolutely, I think you're kind of fucked up if you're going out in the field and your knife's not sharp. It's like having a dirty gun, right? Like, keep your shit tight, right? And so if your blade's getting dull at all, it should be sharp. If you have a sharp knife, it should cut rope. You know, this idea like, well, I need this blade to, you know, a serrated blade to cut rope. It's like, well, a brand new sharp blade that's sharpened right will cut the shit out of rope. That's my problem with serrations is once they're dull, they're damn near impossible for people to get sharp.
Yeah.
But you know, they have their place and their purpose, but it's actually kind of interesting how few requests we get from people for a serrated blade.
Really?
Like maybe once or twice a month, maybe.
Yeah. Would you throw kitchen knives in the same category in terms of how to sharpen them and maintain them?
Yeah, just with finer stones. You know, some of those kitchen knife stones can go up to like 8,000 grit, which is really, really fine. But generally, yeah, it's with a stone, and you kind of step that down. If you're just doing maintenance, it can be with a real fine stone. And I generally see people with honing rods kind of fuck edges up because they get a little crazy and their angles are all over the map. You know, I think it's better to take a little bit of time on a stone and, you know, try to be a little bit more precise.
Yeah. What is your take on, I guess, whether it's kitchen knives or we'll call them normal hunting knives, the two sharpening methods I've used that seem like they work fairly well. One is it's the disc. It's that wheel that it's a little magnet. It says like 15, 20, 25. You know, it gives you the degree angle. You slap that on the knife and then roll that actually works fairly well.
You know, it's funny. I just ordered one. I haven't even messed with them. Yeah. I ordered one because I do want to be able to answer these questions for customers. I don't see why it wouldn't work. I think it helps people be consistent. A lot of people are too worried about the angle a little bit. Like 1 degree here or there isn't going to hurt you. Yeah. I think it actually stops people a lot of times from even wanting to sharpen their own knife because they're so worried about the angle. What's more important is consistency. You know, whatever angle you are at, if it's 17, 18, 20 degrees, you try to maintain that angle and get a nice crisp edge.
Yeah. To me, it just makes it mindless. You know, it's like if you have the 20-degree angle on it, like you just swipe it a handful of times on each side, wipe it off, and now it's fucking sharp again.
Yeah.
You know, for a basic kitchen knife that's not an heirloom, that, you know, that you're not stabbing fucking pigs with a dog on their ear, you know, your life fucking depends on it, type of thing. The other one is that I've used that I don't think works as well, but I'm curious to get your take. I don't even know what the fuck you would call it, but it's like this metal piece that almost looks like a shield, and it's got these two rods that like have tension that you can split open, and it's a V, and you run it that way.
I'm really not a fan of the pull through V rod stuff. You know, it does not give you the same edge that I'm looking for with that wire edge and whatnot. I've never found a V rod situation that I thought got anywhere near, like you say, the disc one where you're sliding and stuff. That makes more sense. Yeah. You know, stones and even some of those grinders and whatnot, you can get a lot of good results out of. There's ones where you can clamp on the blade and kind of, you know, it keeps again that same angle. Yeah, those work. Yeah, those Lanskys work fine.
Yeah, that's what we used in buds, because the dive knife that we carry is you know, like similarly, that was part of your kit that it's on you all the time. Like an instructor could come up and say, let me see your knife, you know, anytime and test for sharpness. Usually it's just during a room inspection, you know, but they would try to shave their hair and, you know, do a couple little things or their fucking fingernails or whatever. And if it wasn't sharp enough, like they would take it. And then there's the bunks, you know, with the square tube metal frames, they would take it and just fucking bang the edge on that and be like, this motherfucker better be sharp tomorrow. And there's like a fucking serrated ridge taken out of it. And you're like, holy fuck, it's going to take me a fucking month to sharpen that thing, you know? But
but I mean, on the kind of the especially the tactical side of the world, like, you know, or a first responder, if you pull your blade out, you know, outside of just a normal, you know, everyday task, generally it might be a situation where speed is required. Like you need to cut something free quickly, you know, in a dive situation, maybe someone's tangled up in some ropes. They're getting drugged to the fucking bottom. If fucking you don't cut
sea
that
lions
rope.
Attacking you.
I try to stay out of the damn ocean, but, myself personally, but
well, so on that too, I guess you mentioned the thickness, is that you see a lot of blades that are too thick to keep a good edge on. Where do you kind of put like axes, tomahawks, kukris, you know, things that are meant to have a lot of weight behind them for chopping and, you know, or killing or whatever? Is that an exception, or are you still going for as thin as possible? But
well, even with a blade, even with a knife blade, there starts to become there's a bit of a balance and there's a trade-off here, right? So the way that heat treating of a blade works is, you know, people get these terms wrong all the time, but they'll ask, you know, how hard is that blade? It's like, well, it's 60, 61 Rockwell. Well, I got a blade that's 66 Rockwell. It's hard as hell. It's like, well, congratulations, but you're carrying also a piece of glass. It's gonna break, or you're gonna have to make that blade so thick to make it, you know, hold up to any kind of flex, right? So there's toughness and there's hardness, and it's an inverse scale. So the harder a blade is, the less toughness you're gonna have. As you lower that hardness with heat treating, then that's where toughness comes in. So for example, when I did my Journeyman test at 15 and my Master Bladesmith test at 19, I had to build a blade that would chop a 1-inch rope in half in one chop, which that just shows sharpness. And it does show a little bit of edge geometry. If you have this big bull-nosed edge, even if it's sharp, it hits that rope, it's gonna be hard for it to pass through, right? Okay, so without sharpening, you then have to chop 2 2x4s in half, and that blade still has to shave. So as many chops as you want, you get through 2 2x4s. It's got to shave hair off the arm. So now that starts to show you it's got wear resistance. It clearly put up to all that work, and it's still sharp. But if it's too hard, and you hit knot in that board or something, your edge is going to chip. And there again, if your edge is too thin, like if you try to do that with a chef's knife, it doesn't have enough support behind that edge, that leading edge, it's going to chip out. Okay. So once you're all done with that and that blade shaves, you now have to bend that blade in a vise 90 degrees without breaking it.
Holy shit.
So what you've just proven is that you have the ability as a knife maker to make a blade that's hard enough to hold up to wear with the rope and the 2x4, but still tough enough to hold up to abuse with like side flexion, with strength, right? And that's finding that really good balance. And that also is in your selection of steel. Not every steel is going to do that. And so if you choose the wrong steel from the beginning, you're fucked, right? So when it gets into the working knives, and I'll step through from hunting into the tactical space, because I think this is where this line becomes fuzzy. We have a knife called a speed goat. I actually brought you a mini goat here. It's a little smaller blade, but that thing's 100 thousandths thick. It's super thin, really fine tip on it.
Could we grab those and you kind of show or explain while you're talking about it?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The visual of being able to say like,
yeah,
you know, this is why you should watch on YouTube also.
Yeah.
If you're just listening, but.
So I'll pop this open here real quick. This is a mini goat. I actually carry one of these. every day in my pocket. So this blade right here is 90 thousandths thick. That's about a 3 1/4 inch blade or so, 3-inch blade. This edge right here is about 10 thousandths thick. So if you look at the profile of that tip, if you decide you're going to use this as a screwdriver and you're going to break it. Yeah. Like it's going to break.
Yeah.
But when you're using this knife for cutting tasks, like as a hunting knife, if you're caping out an animal, I've broken down whole elk with this knife without sharpening. I cut an elk completely in half with this blade, through the spine, took the joints, the hips apart, the whole 9 yards with this blade.
Wow.
They're an impressive little knife. But again, would I send this knife to Afghanistan with a ranger? No, I wouldn't, because if he's across that side of the world, he doesn't know what he's going to run into. You try to pry a goddamn door open with this thing, it's going to break.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, to me, that's the one that you keep in your pocket that you only use if somebody's on top of you.
Yeah.
Like you don't open boxes with it. You don't.
Right. And it's generally it's just your handy, got to cut a little rope or open an MRE or whatever you got to do, with that blade. Now, you start stepping up. We have hunting knives that get a little bit bigger in size and a little bit thicker. The guy that wants to rip up through the sternum of a white-tailed deer, pop cartilage,
or a terrorist.
Or a terrorist, which I fully support. And then you start getting into the tactical stuff. And again, I'm no quote unquote operator, but I have a lot of friends obviously in this space, and I actually went to, Brian Morgan, Hat Creek Training out in Idaho. He runs a sniper training facility there for all special forces guys. He runs active duty teams. That's all he does is special forces sniper teams come through there every week. It's an incredible place to train. Holy shit. I mean, you're shooting, they think the house is at about 2,800 feet in elevation, and you'll go up to 6,500 or something like that. And it's super high angle, cross canyon, dealing with winds.
Wow. Where at in Idaho?
Rigby. I went there last year. Actually earlier this year, and he was kind enough to let me sit in with a bunch of Army sniper guys, and I got to just kind of be a fly on the wall during that class, and then I got to shoot with all of them and did some training for a SIG event that I went and did. A competition.
That's cool.
But I went last fall to, he has an event every 2 years. It's called the Nasty, and it's a competition between all the branches of the Special Forces snipers. And so you got your SEALs there and your Green Berets and Air Force guys. You got everybody, Coast Guard guys, all these different guys there. And then they run through and they shoot. I think it's over 3 or 4 days. And it's mind-boggling. I mean, you're watching these guys shoot 1,300 meters across a canyon, and the wind's going left at 20 miles an hour on your ridge, and it's going right at 30 miles an hour on the far ridge, and they're trying to call wind, and it's fucking awesome.
That's cool.
But we give away we give a knife away every single week to his top shooter award for each team. But when I went to that Nasty, I took a bunch of our kind of tactical knives that we were developing at that time and showed them around to those dudes. And one thing you'll learn when you talk to all these different guys from I could talk to 10 different SEALs and ask them what the perfect knife is, and you get 12 answers.
Yeah.
I started learning there's no consensus in that world over anything.
Yeah. Except that the only thing 2 people can agree on is that the third guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which sounds like I was a lineman for the power company, and that it was the same kind of culture. But like this is a dagger that we came up with that's kind of modeled after the V24, kind of the famous dagger that was made for the Devil's Brigade, kind of where Special Forces was actually born.
Yeah.
But I shortened it up and I made it more carryable. But this is where you start getting into the thickness question of a blade. What is a dagger for? It's made for stabbing somebody in the goddamn neck or chest, right? So I'm less worried now about exactly how sharp I can get the edge, how long is that edge going to last. You know, it's less of a cutting tool that a different design knife is than this. Now I start worrying about how robust is the tip, how robust is the blade if it does hit something hard. And you start having that balance, right? We have a task force knife, we call it, that's like a typical 4-inch blade, but it's thicker than our 4-inch hunting knife blade because, again, I'm trying to provide some insurance that guy can do whatever he needs to on the other side of the world and come home with his knife not broken half. You know, and so there is a real fine line and a balance with this stuff. And you're trying to kind of, we're not, with our hunting stuff, every now and then people break tips off of knives. I don't try to make knives for the lowest common denominator. Like if you're an idiot, you could break one of our knives. Yeah. If you're using it to cut and do what it's designed to do, it's probably going to do a better job than most any other production knife you're going to find on the market.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too, I mean, it's really no different than firearms. You know, it's like, hey, what gun are you going to carry? It's like, well, what are we doing?
Right.
You know,
exactly.
How far is a shot? Is it, you know, are we clearing rooms where there's no fucking room, you know, on a ship? Is it, you know, like do I need 1,400 yards of fucking accuracy? I mean, right. I'm shooting, you know, people that are for sure wearing fucking body armor and, you know, what, like, you know, so to me it's, you know, selecting the specific tool for the job is the biggest part of it. Yeah. You know, because if you're fucking that up, like, it doesn't matter how good it is. If it's not applicable, it's like using a hammer instead of a screwdriver. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter how good the hammer is, you know, if it's not really doing what you need. But
well, and I see a ton of guys in the military actually starting to carry over the last few years, before we ever tried to market or do anything with the actual military space, you see a ton of guys carrying you know, this mini goat knife, because this knife, I mean, feel what that weighs. That's 1 ounce.
Yeah, it weighs nothing.
So guys love to tuck that in somewhere on their kit. Yeah. 99% of the time, they're not going to need it. If they do need a blade, it's generally just going to be a utilitarian little thing. Yeah. They use it. And also you got 6 or 8 feet of cord there. So if you need to,
that's sharp.
if you need to pull that cord off of there, you actually have cord to use.
Yeah. That's super cool.
But again, they're going to probably have a backup knife that's longer, that's more robust, that if they're really going to get in a bind, you know, if you're going through SEER school, that's not the blade for you. Yeah. You know.
And you processed a whole elk with that fucking thing.
Yeah.
Wow. I was going to ask, the knife that you passed your Master Bladesmith test with, I'm assuming you still have that.
I do, yeah.
I mean, is that something you like put in a fucking case and like frame?
I should. It's just sitting in my gun safe. Yeah. And that's the first phase. That's your performance blade.
Oh, okay.
You then have to fly to Atlanta to the Atlanta Blade Show and present 5 knives to a panel of judges, and they judge the fit and finish of the blade. So, of all of your knives. So if they find anything wrong with any of those knives, they'll fail you.
If that does happen, if you fail, do you have to wait a certain amount of time before you can?
6 months, 6 months.
Can you do it as many times as you want?
Yeah, you can. I've seen people try a couple times and then give up. Yeah. And the blade that you do for your journeyman test for the performance is just a plain steel blade, meaning it's not Damascus. But the blade you do for your Master Smith test has to be out of 300 layers of Damascus steel or more. So you have to forge your own steel for that. And those blades are allowed to crack to a certain point. They just aren't allowed to break. They can't crack past halfway. Okay. So when you bend a blade that far, there again, you can allow a little bit of a crack. They just don't want a complete failure. Yeah. The Damascus steel portion adds an element too, because you're forge welding steel together.
So you bring up Damascus, and that makes me curious that there are a lot of higher end knife manufacturers or bladesmiths, whatever you want to call them, out there today, and kind of in this space that say it's Damascus, but technically it isn't, though, is it? It's not true Damascus.
I'm seeing a lot of like faux Damascus stuff where they laser a pattern on the blade.
Right. But it's not actual layered steel the way true Damascus is. Correct?
No, and which really pisses me off, because when you make Damascus for real, you forge welding at 2200 degrees or higher, generally around 2500, you're forge welding layers of steel together to
300?
make one billet. Yeah, you generally will start with a stack of say 20, 25 layers. You'll forge that bar out, and then if you chop that 25 layer bar into 4 pieces and restack it, you now have 100 layers.
Okay.
And so you kind of manipulate it that way, and you can manipulate the patterns. I mean, if you look at my custom knife website where I do, like my high-end stuff, it's kind of bonkers. I mean, I can forge your name in a bar of steel.
Wow. So can you kind of dive into a little bit where Damascus came from, like why it's used and advantages, disadvantages?
Yeah, I mean, Damascus was kind of an art form that was lost, it originally was really, you see old like Damascus shotgun barrels and some of that stuff is really, really, really cool. But it was really actually, when you look at forging in general, was a way of utilizing material and getting something more useful out of the steel that you had. So if you imagine way back in the day, I have these 6 or 8 pieces of steel, but I need to make something that's bigger and of a different shape than what I've got. If you combine that stuff together and you stack it all up, you can create a bigger billet of steel and then forge out whatever you need out of it. Same with forging. Today we just laser cut stuff out and throw steel away. Well, if you shipped steel from St. Louis up to Missouri to Montana and you're homesteading in the middle of nowhere, you're not going to throw any of that shit away. You're going to use every bit of it. And so forging plowshares and stuff like that. A lot of people think about Damascus like in the samurai sword kind of warrior time period. It used to be believed that the more you folded steel, the stronger it got. There were some myths around that. We now know today it's really more about metallurgy. What are the steel elements that are actually in that steel and how is it heat treated that makes a good blade?
Yeah.
But they used to think, the more I fold this, the stronger it gets every layer. So you'd have, 5,000-10,000 layers in a blade. All they really were doing is just burning fucking carbon out of the steel. They weren't helping a damn thing.
Yeah. That's funny.
But, that was an art form that was overseas. And then in the U.S., kind of during the whole time that we settled the U.S., you didn't see Damascus steel. And then knife makers really brought it back in the 70s. Bill Moran, Steve Schwarzer, there's some Don Fogg, Jimmy Fikes. There's some knife makers that are kind of legends to us that started forging again in the 70s and basically trying to figure out how to do it again.
Yeah. And
really brought it back as an art form. And frankly, that's where the American Bladesmith Society was born. Bill Moran started it. And their mission statement is to preserve the art of the forged blade. It was to make sure that technology and that never got lost.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Have you dug into or whether it's acquired from kind of a hobby standpoint or collector standpoint, any like old real samurai swords or any Persian blades or anything like that? Like, have you been able to acquire them or see any in person and really look at them?
Not acquire. So I did build a sword for a Sheik from Abu Dhabi, and he flew me to London. It was kind of a wild story.
Shit, can you tell it?
Yeah. This would have been 2004 or 5, 2005 probably. Actually, it was the spring of 2005. And I remember because I was driving fence posts at my new house back. I had bought this place and it was an absolute disaster. And so I was doing some work on it. And a couple weeks earlier, I'd gotten an email from a guy, again, pre kind of social media. Facebook was kind of around, but we weren't smart enough to be using it really as business yet. Well, this guy sent me an email and he said, my friend would like you to build a sword. Would you consider it? And he sent me a picture of a sword. I emailed back and said, I don't make swords. There's a guy named Vince Evans that's a legend. Call him. He wrote back, my friend really wants you to make the sword. He really likes your Damascus steel. Will you please do it? And he wants this sword. And I wrote back again and said, I don't make swords. And if I did make that sword, it'd be really fucking expensive, And he wrote back and said, again, well, my friend, money isn't going to be a problem, and he really wants you to do it. And so he ended up asking for me to send Damascus samples over to London for his friend to see. And basically, just to get him off my back, I was like, yeah, I'll make you some samples and send them. So a couple weeks later, I'm driving fence posts. I get a phone call, and this guy's like, hey, those samples that you're supposed to have here next week, can you just bring them? And I was like, bring them where? And he's like, to London. Can you fly them here and come here in person? And I got a backhoe running out back and fence posts bucket full. And I'm like, I hadn't even started forging samples yet. I wasn't going to even screw with it. And this guy's name is Hussein. He's actually a white guy. Super nice guy. And I'm like, well, I don't know. So, sure, I guess. Well, so I went to forging freaking Damascus samples. And sure enough, they bought me a first-class ticket to London, flew me over there. And I asked the night before I left, who the hell am I talking to here? This must be some big shot. Sheikh Hamad bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and his dad started the United Arab Emirates. Wow. And his brother's to this day the ruler, and he's like third in command. And this was the height of the Iraq War. Shit was sketchy, and I'm like, I'm gonna get my fucking head cut off. I was like, I don't know if I should go, but it's London. I mean, London's pretty safe. And so I got over there, and I got to the hotel. Nobody shows up. Supposed to meet at 1. It's like 4 PM. Still nobody. I'm like, well, somebody flew my fat ass over here. So I sat in the lobby, and in walks Hussein, all apologetic, and I go out and I meet with. The other thing he had said was like, I start Googling, it's some prince and the protocol, you're supposed to bow and all this shit. Well, I call him back and I'm like, dude, I ain't bowing for any man. Yeah. Like, unless your name's Jesus. No. And he's like, no, you don't have to worry about that. And shit, the guy was actually super nice. He was a big hunter, asked me all about elk hunting and told me some funny stories about how he accidentally almost shot a bushman in Africa. And he thought about mounting him in his trophy room and shit. Yeah, it was kind of wild. But he took me to the Wallace collection, and we got a private room, and they brought in this sword that he sent me a picture of, and it was built in the late 1600s. And I got to hold the thing. I got to take all the measurements off the blade. It was incredible. Wow. Had gems all over it and shit. At T-back Kilij sword, very difficult to make. And so then we went back to his hotel, and we walk into this.
And I don't remember the rest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I woke up in my bed at home. Damnedest thing.
My ass sore. But no, actually, we walk in there. There's like 4 or 5 bodyguards. We walk in, sit down, and Sheikh Hamad was like, we got to talking, and then he's like, wait, we were late. He's like, did you eat lunch or dinner or anything? And I was like, no, I'm fine. I was nervous as shit, And he's like, no, you need to eat. And I was like, no, I'm fine. And he was like, get him some food. And the guy comes over and asks me what I'm on. I'm like, I don't know, a burger or something. And dude, 30 minutes later, they roll in a fucking silver platter the size of that desk. And I learned later when they order for those guys, they just order one of everything on the menu.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, you eat, we'll wait. And he starts watching soccer. And I'm sitting in this giant hotel room with bodyguards and Sheikh Hamad, and I'm eating. I take a bite of this or that or whatever to be polite. And I'm like, all right, I'm good. And he's like, wait, were you not, was something wrong with it? And I was like, no, I'm fucking nervous, man. I don't need to. But anyway, I built a couple swords for him. He flew me to Abu Dhabi to deliver them. Flew into Dubai with the sword and run it through the goddamn scanner, X-ray. And of course, security's like, well, what's this? And so they start asking questions, and they're asking the price of it and this and that. And I had said, it's $37,000. And all of a sudden, I could tell like they were harassing me, like maybe I might not get out of here with this thing. So, and I was hesitating to say who it was for. So finally, I say this is for Sheikh Hamad, and holy shit. Every security guy in the damn airport came down and took their photo with the fucking thing, shit. Passed it around. Wow. Yeah, for an hour, passing this sword around, taking photos. Well, then they're like, you got to pay duty on it. And they're like, and they were like, you said the value is $37,000. I was like, no, $3,700. Bad English, whatever. And we kind of had an argument. I paid my duty on the 3700. Well, Sheik Hamad was pissed because basically what it was, you know, Dubai wanted their little tax from
shaking you down.
The Sheik in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
But it was quite an experience. But and they were super nice to deal with, and obviously, United Arab Emirates is pretty American Pro friendly. But
wow, man, that's a cool story. Having never built one of those and getting to hold the original, and I mean, was there a fair bit of trial and error? Like, did you fuck any of them up? Was it
you're
tough to build?
Having a little PTSD. Yeah, I have a blade hanging in my shop to this day. It was all Damascus. That T-back key liege is very difficult blade to make, and I screwed it up. I probably had a month into this thing, and the forging went south on it, and I had to start over. And it actually kind of was the beginning of a bit of the downfall of like being a full-time custom maker. I had 4 young kids. I spent so much time on that, and yeah, $37,000 sounds like a lot for a sword, but when you take so much time and expense, I end up making kind of shit per hour on it. But I got it done. They were also very difficult to work with because I just couldn't communicate back and forth. And I was communicating through Hussein, who was trying to, translate what the Sheik wanted. And so it took months sometimes to get answers and shit. And it was like the start and stop. And
do you have, I'm assuming you have pictures of that blade, the finished one?
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, I think it's on my website.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I ended up actually I just telling them like, I ain't working for you guys anymore. And not that they were being young and being in business, I didn't have probably the experience and confidence I would today. And I could have operated differently and probably had it been pretty lucrative, but I learned a shit ton for sure. And it was a cool experience.
Did they want you to make other stuff? And you said, no, I'm not.
Yeah. I made some couple daggers for them. What I should have done was basically negotiated a salary, just a monthly salary, and not gone by the piece. And then if they don't answer my email for a month, who gives a shit? I'll do other stuff, know?
Yeah.
But it was not the greatest like financial thing, but, learn a lot from it,
That's a neat story too. Are there any other wild custom pieces that, have similar stories? Or?
I built a spear for a show in Boston that was kind of a prestigious show, kind of like, it's like bring your best, lay it out all on the table. And so I built a spear out of that Arms and Armor of Iran book.
Oh, wow.
It was a 3-bladed spear, so it had a typical dagger spear point on it. It was about 12 inches long, but then it had 2 crescent moon shaped blades that came off the side of it that were sharp on both sides. And it had a African blackwood handle that was about 8 feet long, and it had 18 karat gold bands between the sections of it was all takedown. It could break the whole thing down, put it in a suitcase and put it together. But it was fashioned after the same exact style spear. And in those wars back in those days, a lot of those guys were horseback. So if you're on the ground, that 8.5, 9 foot long spear, you could either spear someone straight on with that spear, stick basically the butt of your spear in the ground and spear somebody on their horse. But the crescent moon blades were for someone that comes riding by you on horseback. As they're going past you, you reach up there and you could basically take the guts out of somebody with one of the hooks on that spear and pull them off their horse. I mean, those big crescent moon shaped blades, if you were to, you would absolutely gut somebody.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. I go through that book and I'm like, there's some crazy shit in there I'd love to make, but it's very expensive. I mean, that's the thing back then, like you were alluding to earlier, they might work on a set of armor for a decade for somebody. I mean, I don't know how long back then they'd work on a particular piece, but I don't think money was an issue back then. It was like, you're making something for the prince or king or whoever.
Well, and it probably just didn't really cost what it costs either, because it is such a different setup.
Yeah.
Where so many things are bartered for is more about time, I would imagine. But
well, and if you're an armor and you work for the crown or whoever,
Like,
that's just what you do.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're probably providing you with the material, you know.
Yeah.
But so that makes me curious. One, from your kind of research of different civilizations, smithing work as it relates to edged weapons and such, does one stand out as being kind of the best? I mean, obviously you don't have an ability to finger fuck all the stuff, but just from, you know, between technology, innovation, production, et cetera, does one kind of time period or civilization seem like the top cock?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I actually, you know, am that much of a historian on a lot of this stuff. I've picked and chose kind of things that I thought were cool.
Yeah.
So in regards to who had the best steel, or there's even debates as to like where some of the areas of civilizations that were making weapons was that steel maybe being sourced from somewhere else? Was it local? I don't really. I just have more of my favorites from, frankly, looking at pictures in a book. I'm not as into like the samurai stuff, frankly. You know, I think a lot of the stuff from England and some of that stuff's cool. Some of the Viking stuff is really neat. But that Persian style was just so unbelievable to me, especially when you combine it with the suits of armor that they had, and you go into the Metropolitan, and I mean, even the armor that they would put on a horse.
So you're saying the Met in New York City?
Yeah. If you go to New York City, I mean, you could spend 4 or 5 days just in the arms and armor section.
Wow.
And it's from every civilization that you can imagine.
And the Persians kind of stands out to you.
I love that shit. Yeah.
What time period?
Sheik actually sent me, I have 4 or 5 original armor helmets.
Oh, shit.
I have a couple shields. I have a shield with the hand pad behind it. If you end up there in Montana, I'll show it to you. But it's got the original leather where they would hold the shield, and there's blood on the cloth. I mean, it looks like a cloth like Jesus wore. I mean, it's like that old looking.
What time period was the height of the Persian technology?
From the stuff I've been looking at, it's like the 1600s, 15 to 1700s.
Oh, okay.
It's not that early. It's not like, 900 or something.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. Or like 2000 BC.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I guess in that same vein, you mentioned Vikings. I'm curious if you have any historical knowledge on, pre-BC or, pre-Jesus, I guess, anything BC of, how they made it. I mean, because to me, the biggest hurdle would be temperature. Mm-hmm. Is it, with regular fire, how are you, how can you heat treat blades at a certain level? Like today you have torches and things that can get shit at a ridiculous degree. Was it not necessary?
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I think there wasn't the knowledge around the heat treating. So I think some places were doing it. You hear stories of, sometimes the stuff was being heated and it was being quenched in water. The other thing is like it was being quenched in a prisoner's blood. I mean, were they stabbing a freaking hot sword through someone? I mean, I think there were all kind of a lot of myth around that stuff.
Well, I mean, shit, there wasn't. I mean, the only kind of oil you'd have would be vegetable products or tallow or, I don't know what.
Fat, rendered fat. Yeah. I honestly don't know. And I don't know how much of that stuff even was heat treated, I'm just not really an expert on a lot of that stuff. Actually, the older I get, the more interested I get. Yeah. When I was young, I was just interested in catching the dude in Texas that I thought was cool.
Yeah.
I would like to actually travel and learn a little bit more with my 43-year-old brain.
Yeah.
Then I actually look at like the things I got to do when I was in my early 20s, and I'm like, man, I'd love to go back over there with this brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super fascinating.
When I went to Istanbul, Sheik Hamid flew me to Istanbul for that deal. That's how I saw the Topkapi Palace, and they were the ones. They were actually having an issue between the Turkish government and the UAE government at the time. Turkey had just like turned over their government, and so they didn't have good connections in the consulates, and so United Arab Emirates consulate send a bodyguard. He picked me up at the airport and he drove me around in a armored damn vehicle the whole time. And he was with me all the time, but he's the one that took me to the Blue Mosque and walked me through there. And we were supposed to handle a certain sword at that palace, just like we did in London. But I was there for 4 days and they couldn't get their damn connections to work. And we never did get like to hold it in person. Yeah. I just looked at it through the glass like another tourist. Yeah. And Sheik was pissed because, you know, we had spent all that time, but their governments were all fucked up.
When you told them to fuck off, basically, did that rub them the wrong way? I mean, could you rekindle that and be like, hey, I'm in a better spot now and I can make shit for you again?
I don't, you know, with what I'm doing with Montana Knife Company, I don't know that I would have time to do that anyway. But no, they weren't. It was an amicable, it was no hard feelings at all.
I know the answer is probably going to depend on what you're using it for, but is there a best steel, generally speaking, to use for kind of the most multi-purpose application?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think it's just because we're using it. I think we're using it because it is the best. This Magna Cut stainless steel, that wouldn't have been my answer a few years ago. You know, when I launched Montana Knife Company, I was actually using 52-100 ball bearing steel. It's a carbon steel. It's a phenomenal steel, but this steel was developed by Laren Thomas. He's a PhD metallurgist. Actually, his dad, I shared my first knife show in Eugene, Oregon. Devin Thomas let me have like a third of his table to put some of my knives out on as a kid. Laren wasn't even born yet. And it's funny because here we are 30 years later. His son is now a PhD metallurgist and invented this steel for the knife industry. Wow. And you see every major knife company now using it. We were first as a knife company to adopt it. But it's a stainless steel. And the properties that make it, or the reason that it's better than a lot of the stainless steels you've seen before is because he specifically went after increasing the toughness. A lot of stainless steels up until that point could hold a good edge, but if you tried to make them too thin, you know, they were brittle. So he increased the toughness by, 70% or something like that. He actually has a brand new steel out right now that he hasn't even named, that we actually just got a sample of. We're going to do some testing with it and see if it's worth using or not. But that Magna Cut, it's not cheap, but it's highly stain resistant. So if you're in salt water, it's good enough for that. Still tough, got a good edge holding. It's a nice balance of all the things you're looking for.
Yeah, is carbon steel? Or I guess, can you explain the difference or what makes carbon steel carbon?
Yeah, at a certain point, it's basically the chromium level. And again, I'm not a metallurgist, but at a certain point, you get enough chromium in steel. And there's kind of a scale that they grade basically when you start getting like a low level of stainless where a blade will rust with a little bit of, say, salt water on it after a certain amount of time, and how much does it rust and how deep does it rust. But basically you get to a certain point where there's enough chromium in that steel and some other elements that make it kind of quote unquote stainless. Yeah. 52-100 ball bearing steel, forever has been a really popular knife steel for knife makers, along with like 5160, which is a spring steel. So back in the 70s, a ton of knife makers were using that because like the old Studebaker springs, you could get them at any junkyard anywhere, and it was
just cut a chunk out and
great knife steel. Yeah. Ball bearings are made to resist wear in industry, so it kind of stands to reason it actually makes pretty damn good knife edge. Yeah. It's tough as hell, easy to sharpen. It's phenomenal. I still love that steel. But we're making thousands of knives as a knife company. The stainless part is important to people. You get a lot of people that, like, personally, I don't care if my knife gets a little patina or a little rust on it or whatever, sharpen the edge, good to go. But, you sell thousands of knives and you get somebody and they've got one little pit on it and they're upset.
This thing's a piece of shit.
Yeah.
What was the number nomenclature for ball bearing? 5190?
52100.
52100.
Yeah, and what the 100 at the end stands for 1% carbon. So 5160 is 0.6% carbon.
Okay.
The more carbon you have in steel, the harder it gets.
Yeah.
So like a mild steel will have a very low carbon content. So you can heat that thing up and dunk it in straight water, and it's not going to get hard.
Yeah. So I assume it's the same technology as cookware, carbon steel pans, and whatever. Because I mean, for me, not that I'm a professional chef, but I do really enjoy cooking. Carbon steel pans are by far my favorite.
Are they?
Yeah, they're just a really good mix of kind of in between cast iron and stainless.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
that or ceramic coated cast iron. But
Yeah.
do you guys sell any blades that are that are ball bearing steel still?
We do. Yeah. This one this little mini goat right here.
Oh shit.
Is still 52100.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's awesome.
Yep. And it is, still tougher than our Magna Cut as far as like that little thin blade. From a toughness standpoint, it's probably hard for a customer to notice. Like if you took that blade in a vise and bent it, it's going to break a little bit later than the Magna Cut one would.
Yeah.
But the Magna Cut blade's going to hold an edge just a little bit longer.
I gotcha.
But then that Magna Cut's going to be a little bit harder to sharpen. So again, there's trade-offs and all this stuff.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite custom piece you've done, and do you have a favorite knife that Montana Knife Company makes?
Yeah, on the custom side, that spear I made was pretty badass.
You still have it?
No, I sold it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mind if I ask how much you sold it for?
That one was like 12 grand, I think.
Yeah. Is there a ballpark average for your custom pieces? I know it's going to depend on size, but I mean, if you look at historically,
yeah,
10 over.
Nah, probably $3,000 or $4,000. Today it's going to be more than it was back then, obviously. But I did do one. I could share it with you. It's on my Instagram. It was more of one of those learning experiences. I was learning to solder gold.
Oh wow!
And I fucked up a lot of gold one day. It was a real bad day. But I did one. It's a buoy with a ton of 18 karat gold on it that I soldered. I was soldering gold at night, which when it's dark out, you can see the color as you're heating better.
Oh wow! And
it went all beautifully. And I usually worked late, so I came in the middle of the night, went to bed, went back out next day. Sun's out. It's a bright, shiny day. And I'm heating up my gold, like pretty cocky that I'm a fucking goldsmith now, and heating it up. And it just, when gold hits the melting temperature, there's no warning. It just goes bleh.
Yeah.
And I melted a big chunk of gold. And I got, again, one of those, people don't understand, like custom knife makers are kind of a starving artist situation. Like, you sell a knife for $10,000, but you just worked on it for
6 months.
Freaking 6 months, yeah. You would have been better off just making one hunt knife at a time for $200 for somebody.
Yeah.
But that was one of those, you screw up a couple $1,000s worth of gold, customer doesn't pay for that.
Well, I mean, you can reheat it and redo it though, right?
Well, I think technically you probably could reheat that and roll it back out flat, but this was sheet stock, and once it when gold melts, it also basically turns into a ball. And
but I guess price per ounce wise, it's still worth
still worth not what you paid for it, but it's still worth something. You could send it in, and instead I stuck it in I still have a little bag of like gold scraps for a rainy day.
Yeah.
Mostly it's just a bag of tears. But and then as far as the Montana Knife Company knives, I mean, I'm still pretty biased towards our Blackfoot knife, and it's probably just because that's the knife I launched the company with. It's a do-it-all. I could only afford to make one knife when I did that, and I was still a journeyman lineman working for the power company at that time. What I didn't know is I decided to start doing this in 2019. I showed my first prototypes around in February, the first weekend in February, out at Bert Soren's place at Sornex called Winter Strong. I showed a bunch of prototypes around, and as we're flying home on the news in the Dallas airport, they're talking about this thing called COVID. Well, 2 weeks later, the world's coming, ending. And
2 weeks to stop the spread.
Yeah, yeah.
4 years of stupidity.
Well, stepping back a little bit, in 2009, I had 4 young kids. I've been making custom knives, and I was starting to just question the career path as far as and what I was turning the news on, seeing that we're headed into potentially a depression. If you watch all the news, the housing market was crashing and shit was, and people were canceling, my 1 year, 2 year backlog of $5,000 knives was down to like a month. Cause that's the first thing people cut out of their budget. Yeah. And I'm like, man, and you go watch the news, like we're in it for the long haul here. And, so I had this background to operating equipment, and I'd also been teaching a buddy of mine how to make knives who worked for the power company. He was a welder. Shit, he had fucking paid vacation, benefits, like all this shit that I didn't have. And I'm like, God, you can go hunt on a Friday and get paid to do it. I was kind of jealous. And so they had a job opening I applied for, and I ended up getting a job there and switched over from the welding side to the electric side the next spring, because all the linemen all had gray hair. I could tell that's where the opportunity was. And so I got an apprenticeship, and over the next 3 years, became a journeyman lineman. So back to 2019, I'm a journeyman lineman working. I have this, and I registered the name Montana Knife Company when I was 19. So I'd been talking about building this company for 15 years. To the point I'm sure all my friends thought I was full of shit. And so COVID starts happening, and I'm motivated at this point, like I'm going to do this friggin' company, right? And COVID starts happening, and I told my wife in February, March, I was like, in 2009, I watched the news, and I changed my career path because of the news, and I said, I am not doing that this time. I'm going to ignore the news. And we flat out ignored COVID. And I just started trying to build my knife company at night and in the morning, on the weekends, around my day job, ignored COVID. We launched our website in July. And, by fall, it was going pretty well. My wife kept trying to get me to quit my job. And I'm like, lineman's a good job, good salary, all that. And, I needed December 31st off. Thomas Rhett, the country music singer, had requested to meet up and get a knife from me a few hours from where I live. They were skiing, and I told my boss, I'm like, hey, I need this day off, because, at that point, maybe he posts about it, maybe it's a big deal, I don't know. At that point, anything would have helped, right? Well, big corporation, he's like, well, you're out of vacation time. And I'm like, well, dude, I get 4 weeks the next day. January 1st, I'm full on my bank of vacation. And basically they weren't flexible about it. And so I walked in December 30th and I was like, hey, what about tomorrow? Like, how are we going to work this out? And he was like, well, you don't have any vacation. I'm like, all right, I'll be done at noon today. I'll go finish this job and then I'll be done. So I quit. And that's kind of the launch of Montana Knife Company, the 1st of January of 21.
Oh, wow.
And
a little bit of burn the boats.
Yeah, I did. And I about got sick driving home that day. I was like, God, what am I doing? And I didn't take a paycheck for half of 21. At that point, I'd partnered up with my business partner to help with marketing. Neither one of us got paid. I was in my 2-car garage, and I only had my kids helping me assemble knives. And I hired a high school kid that spring to start helping a little bit right before he graduated, and he kind of kept helping through the summer, and I think he could see something was going here. He had a full ride scholarship academically to college, and he skipped that year, stayed working with me. His family was displeased with him.
Yeah, I bet.
And hired a couple more people, and we just kept growing. And, that first year of 21, our goal was to do 100,000 in sales. That's what we told the insurance company, and we ended up doing 1.9 million that year.
Holy shit. Wow.
And then we just kind of been a freight train from there. Wow. So now we have almost 80 employees.
Man.
But we're still making knives in my backyard, my horse pasture.
You're building a big shop, is that right?
We are. We bought some land, and we just poured walls Friday. We're going to start tipping steel up in February, but hopefully a year from basically today, we're going to move into this new facility, Because I have like 50 employees that report to work, or 55 that report to work at my house.
Oh, wow.
And parking's a disaster, and it's crazy. It's a dead end road.
A lot of privacy there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Come out with the Cousin Eddie shitter's full fucking robe on.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's
employees.
very, there's definitely no privacy around there. And my neighbors, it's a dead end dirt road that no one drives down, and I'm sure my neighbors are like, what in the hell?
Yeah, what the fuck you got going on?
Yeah.
Like you're moving drugs.
But you know, I kind of had to sneak the building we're in now. I built that building in 21 or 22 because my 2-car garage was obviously not work anymore. And I built this, it was 10,000 square feet. And I kind of snuck it by the county a little bit. And, but I couldn't afford to buy anything else, couldn't afford to rent anything. I mean, we were barely taking a paycheck of any kind at that point. Yeah. And I said, well, hey, we'll build this. And if we, you know, this will kind of prove out, like, if we grow out of this in the next 5 years, then we got something, you know, and we'll go buy something. But if things don't go well or doesn't grow, at least our overhead's real small here, and we can stay here as long as we need. But 2 years later, we're...
Yeah, I think, you know, just the kind of standard bootstrap mentality for a startup is crucial, you know, for all those reasons.
Yeah, and we didn't borrow a dime. That was one thing I kind of refused. I already thought I was putting my family at enough risk by quitting a good job. Yeah. And so people would bitch at us like, why don't you have knives on your website, and why don't you make more knives? And it's like, I am buying as much steel as I can afford to buy. Yeah. And then we make them, and we don't do pre-orders. I refuse to take people's money until we have something we can send out. Yeah. And you know, so we'll buy what we can. I mean, that first steel that I bought, my wife's dad had passed away when we were kind of talking about starting this, and she inherited about 20 grand. Oh, wow. And so we used that 20 grand to buy the first steel. Oh, wow. And then a couple of years later, I wrote her a check and paid her back, and she went and bought a couple horses. And
that's cool.
Something her dad would have actually been proud of. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If you were going to be pitted in a knife fight against somebody, which knife from your company would you carry into that?
That's a good question.
Nobody's ever asked you that, probably.
As far as a blade goes, I mean, I guess it would probably be a big one. I mean, it's actually kind of funny. Like, we can't run, it's very difficult to run paid ads. Like with this little mini goat knife, because it's like a hunting knife, we can't run paid ads, but we can run paid ads with a chef's knife that big, which is funny because it's a culinary tool. Yeah, wow. So to be honest, I mean, it might be a damn chef's knife just because it's a big blade or one of our big bushcraft knives, but we make a hatchet. I might choose that hatchet. Yeah. Because it'd give somebody a real problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Hit somebody with that.
Yeah. So I assume in terms of the what's next for Montana Knife Company, it's the finishing of the facility. You're going to have a black rifle in the building. Is that right? That's pretty cool.
Ideally, to that knife fight, though, I'd bring my P365 and fucking shoot you before you even got close to me with your knife.
That's probably the best answer.
So this is going to be about a 50,000 square foot building, and the retail space in it, we're going to put a black rifle location in it. You know, we're right on the interstate, right at an exit, the exit to go up towards like Andy Stumpf's to go up to Glacier Park. Yeah. It's a really great location for like tourists that are coming in out of state, and they'll see us right from the highway. So having a coffee shop in there will be cool because it's kind of even a reason for locals that have maybe been there 10 times, like, come out and have a cup of coffee, and we'll probably have some other stuff for sale in there besides knives from friends or whatever.
Will people be able to see any of the knife making processes?
Yeah, there's actually going to be big glass windows in the coffee shop that look into the manufacturing floor. Awesome. And then we'll probably give tours. The offices upstairs, there's actually going to be kind of a steel catwalk, the full length of the manufacturing facility when you go up to those offices where you'll see out over the floor. Wow. So we can take people up there and kind of show them and explain the process.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you, so right now you said you have 55 employees that actually show up and are, bending steel and whatnot?
Yeah, something like that. It actually might be more like 65. I think we had 3 more start today.
So do you, like, for a quality control standpoint, are you looking at every single knife still before they go out, or do you?
Me personally, no, but that high school kid, Tristan, that started with us, that didn't go to college, he's now managing like 40 of those people downstairs. You know, him and I worked side by side for, you know, the first few years. And so he's largely in charge of that with a couple of our other employees. It's actually kind of funny. I was so adamant about quality control that sometimes they bring me something, or I'll look at something that got rejected and I'm like, the hell's wrong with this thing? They're like, oh, there's this tiniest little, like tiny little scratch on like the underneath side down on the handle. By then I'm like, sell that thing.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So it's funny. I think they're so scared of getting their ass chewed for quality that they've almost gone over the top the other way.
Yeah. No shit.
Yeah.
Some pretty impressive awards. Top 10 best hunting knife lists, Forbes best ultralight hunting knife, Gear Junkie's runner-up best hunting knife, Outdoor Life's best handmade knife, Field and Stream's best butcher knife, MKC's Blackfoot Fixed Blade 2.0 was also featured as one of Hook and Barrel Magazine's backcountry hunting gear essentials. You got knives used and promoted by Joe Rogan and Dana White. Are there other accolades or kind of goals that you have in that kind of arena to try to accomplish? Like, do you want to get a chef's knife in the White House, or I mean, anything like that?
I got that.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Trump's got a set of our chef's knives.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm pretty good friends with Junior, and he.
Oh, okay.
I went and met Trump in North Carolina this year and gave him a chef's set.
That's awesome. How'd you get that past Secret Service?
Secret Service are big fans of ours.
Really?
Yeah, it's actually kind of cool. They, you know, with us doing our new tactical's new for us.
Yeah.
And I always make sure everyone knows I'm not, you know, stolen valor here, trying to act like I'm one of them. But bunch of the Secret Service guys carry our stuff. In fact, they just put a second order in for like 40 of our war goats and our battle goat knives. They're carrying them. It's pretty cool. But yeah, no, we cleared that through Secret Service, and I brought them in, and I told them, I was like, I was the only kid in junior high allowed to bring knives to school, and apparently I'm the only adult allowed to bring knives to a rally.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, so and Junior's been awesome. He came and stayed at my house this summer, and he's just a great guy.
That's cool.
Very, very happy about what's going on there. Tulsi, actually, she competed with me in that SIG event, and she's a fucking badass with a gun.
I really like her a lot. I think she's an incredible woman, and I'm excited to see, where she goes.
I'm very excited about that. But as far as those accolades go, I don't have any goals in that. Our goal is to make the best knife company in America. Yeah. Not the biggest, not, the accolades, if they come, or whatever. My goals are to have as many people have one of our knives as possible and enjoy them, pass them down. I'd love to see everybody that's in uniform have one of our knives. Yeah. If a dude's in some shithole in the world somewhere and he pulls that knife out and he's whittling on something and all he thinks about is like, hey, there's 50, 60 people in Montana that made this knife that care about us out here. Like, cause we do. I mean, we're, it's something we're really proud of is just, supporting the military and veterans. And, I mean, you look at it 10 years ago this year, my house burned down. I was living in a camper, broke as absolute fuck, had to borrow money from a knife collector to get through my divorce. Couldn't afford, I bought a piece of shit truck from one of my foremen. I couldn't afford a decent truck. One of my foremen at work sold me one of his trucks. And then that sumbitch broke down on me every week. In fact, it stranded me on Lolo Pass with my kids in a fucking snowstorm. Wow. 10 years ago, I couldn't have been broker. I had to beg, borrow, and steal to just keep my property and my shop and all that stuff. And today it's like 80 employees and building this knife company and all this stuff. Like only in America does that shit happen. Yeah. Only in America can you go broke and then become wealthy and maybe go broke again and become wealthy again. Yeah.
Hopefully that's not the case.
I hope not. but and not that I'm wealthy. I'm actually fucking broker than ever now that we borrowed money to build a building. But the point is like, what country is that possible in besides America? And there's other free countries, kinda, but like you generally don't see those stories coming out of other countries.
For sure. Yeah, that's super cool and impressive and inspiring, no doubt about it. With Joe and Dana, did they reach out to you? Did you send shit to them, or how did that work?
I have no idea how Joe ended up wearing one of our hats originally. I think we have so many mutual friends that somehow he ended up with one of our hats on the podcast, and then he was given a couple knives by guests, and then kind of became to the point where we actually. I hate to overstate this. Like we became friends. You know, but it's not like he calls or texts me all the time. Yeah. But like every now and then I'll get a random text from him, or he'll mention us or whatever on the podcast. I've gone down to his club and hung out with him there, and you know, he got us some tickets for a UFC fight. He's a super nice guy.
Yeah.
But I don't want to overstate that because I wouldn't say I'm like one of his boys. Yeah. I always hesitate on that. Dana. Somebody gave him one of our knives, and then we sent him some, and then he posted a funny video one time because his camera guy cut the shit out of himself in Dana's office with one of our knives, and Dana went like on Instagram and was like, "Look at this clown." He's like, "These Montana knife companies are so fucking sharp," and Dana still tells that story. I went down there and he was telling me, he's like, "Dude, he filleted himself right on my desk, bleeding all over the place."
Great, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. That's the coolest part about this job is like meeting cool people.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's literally by far my favorite part is just whether they're no name, just dudes that have like amazing stories or famous people.
Yeah, I mean, same here with between this show and selling personal protection dogs, kind of similarly, like you just meet fascinating fucking people.
Yeah.
You know? And just the networking and the experiences that you get to have are priceless, you know, like you couldn't pay to do them, you know?
Exactly.
What haven't I asked you that I should have?
When are we going to have a folding knife? That's the
very first Patreon question.
That's like the number one question. That was actually the most searched term on our website during the Black Friday time. Yeah. Folding knives are a bitch to make, just lots of little parts and tolerances and whatnot, but we're targeting 2026 for that.
Oh, okay.
And to be honest, just to survive the next year in our building today, like we're so maxed on our space, there's no way we could, even if we were ready, we couldn't make folding knives in this building. So,
all right, John, your question was answered. 2026 is the goal. Matthew says, how would you recommend someone get into knife making with zero experience?
Well, you have the benefit these days of YouTube. Joining the American Bladesmith Society, there's some forums that are pretty cool. The guys are really willing to share. You can generally find a knife maker in your area, and if you hit that guy up and do it in a way where you don't seem like an absolute douchebag or stalker, generally people are willing to kind of show you something, especially if you actually offer to pay for a class. A lot of these knife makers might, it's like, hey, would you mind doing 3 or 4 classes and I'll pay you to do it. A lot of these guys have spent 30 years plus learning these lessons that they'll pass down to you and save you so much headache if you're willing to just pay for a little bit.
Yeah. Do you think like you could do a 3-day course, like if it was like a mini apprenticeship where you said like, hey, whether it's you're willing to pay or a knife maker wants to charge you like $2,500 for a 3-day.
Yep.
Like, is that something that would be?
There's knife makers that do it all over the place. And really what it does is it gets you a good idea of like, okay, what equipment do you really need to start making knives? I think a lot of times people actually think that they got to go buy the most fancy equipment right off the bat, and you really don't. A simple little belt grinder, you can hand make you can make a forge for $100. And I will say this about one thing for veterans out there that might be struggling a bit. One of the most therapeutic things you can do is heat a piece of steel up and hit the shit out of it. And we actually, in 2021, right after, Brandon and I hadn't been taking a paycheck for 2 months. In August, we flew in that year, about 15 veterans, they set up tents in my yard. We had bonfire and whatnot, but we taught them how to forge over the next 3 days.
That's cool.
Forged blades. And the whole point of it was we wanted to give back. And I told them, all right, there's 15 of you here. 13 of you are probably going to come and just have a good time in Montana and go home and never do this again. But good on you. Just a fun trip. Maybe you meet a few friends. But I guarantee there's going to be one or two that this like strikes a chord with. And sure shit, 2 or 3 of those guys are still doing it to this day.
Oh, that's cool.
And, you know, you come home from work, you're home by 5 o'clock, and you sit down and you watch TV, and for the next 5 hours, you don't do a goddamn thing. And whether you end up lost in your thoughts, bored, struggling, whatever it is, you can go out in your garage and roll a little forge out on that apron in front of your garage, and you can put an anvil or a big chunk of steel that you get at a recycle center for next to nothing, and you could make hooks for your wife's bathroom or blacksmith, any kinds of little projects, right? Or make a knife. And I told these guys, I'm not here to make you guys a knife maker. If you want a career and you want to make money, probably should choose something else.
Yeah.
You know, very few knife makers do this full time and really make serious money at it. But it's a hell of a hobby. It's a cool thing to be able to make a knife and give that to your best friend for Christmas or your son or daughter or whatever. But if nothing else, you go out and you can get absolutely lost in that project in your garage for 3 or 4 hours. And the next thing you know, you're hot, tired, need a shower, and you go to bed, right? Yeah. And you feel like you've actually accomplished and done something. And there's also no better feeling than making something with your hands and giving it away.
Yeah.
So I do encourage guys, you don't have to go buy a $5,000 belt grinder like I have. You can go get one for $300 or $400, and a little torch or a little forge or whatever, and just doing something and feeling productive can be very beneficial for the mind and soul.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think it's super, super sound advice. Dano wants to know, with many of the big name and well-known knife designers jumping to Chinese manufacturing, what are the challenges of staying 100% made in the U.S. other than cost?
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Cost for sure is the big one. People are going to comment all the time like, hey, you guys' stuff's expensive. I just saw a set of some buck knife stuff in Costco, and it's $39.99, and it's like a 3-piece set, and I'm just like, I have no fucking idea how they do that, And there is some challenges with certain materials. There's materials that are made overseas that you just can't get. That generally tends to be more in like the apparel side. Yeah. We've tried to sell. For a while, we had 100% American-made apparel on our website, but your lack of options of, the different synthetics or materials or whatever in clothes is so damn hard. But in regards to knives, we are not going to make anything in China. Yeah. The advantage that it does give us, though, is also we don't have to sit there and wait for our stuff to come in for months and months in a container from overseas. We're actually trying to go the opposite, where we speed up our process, where the more processes we bring in-house, the shorter our lead times can get.
Yeah.
But cost is the number one challenge by far. Yeah. And trying to explain to somebody why our knife's $300 and that one over there is $39.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a most overrated knife maker here in the United States that you think?
Even if there was, I wouldn't say it, because I love knife makers. I'm actually friends with them, but I don't even really have that feeling. Like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody'd probably say me.
I doubt that. Ashley wants to know, any Sheik Cali blades?
What the fuck is that?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Sheik Cali blades. So he doesn't know, so I'm going to assume no.
Must not. Yeah, probably not.
Claire wants to know, what's the best home cook knife set on the market, and the novice option for proper sharpening, which we kind of already talked about. But
yeah, I mean, I'm going to say our cook set. I mean, we have a chef set. A lot of people probably don't know that, but again, they're not cheap. But Mareko Malmasi, a knife maker actually out of Washington, who there again, it's like when I talk about the tactical stuff, I'm not a veteran. When I talk about the chef knife stuff, I'm not some professional cook or chef or whatever. So I actually went and found, became friends with a knife maker that is a chef's knife maker. And he helped design some of our first chef's knives, because what I wanted to do is be able to hand that chef's knife to a professional chef and have them go like, this is legit.
Yeah.
And if it's legit for him, that's going to be good enough for anyone in the kitchen. Yeah. We have a 3 knife set, but then we also have some other knives. So you can buy those knives individually if you want to make up your own set. I think the best part of buying those is, and we have people that send them back to us. We sell them in they come in a custom bison leather roll.
Oh, cool.
With, I've got one here. But this one doesn't have the bison leather roll, but it's got a sheath on it. I'll show you here. It's got a sheath on it. So the idea with our chef's knives was that you can actually ship these knives back safely in that roll, or you can take them on the road and take that chef set with you, whether it's going into hunting camp or so like that's our petty knife, which is a little smaller chef blade.
Oh, that's cool.
And these are for you. But
thank you.
But the idea of this was a knife roll that you can take to your families for Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, or you can take into hunting camp. Throw that leather roll in your Yeti Panga bag and throw it on the float plane and fly it into bush camp.
Yeah.
We wanted our blades to actually be able to kind of travel with you, so that's why they have most chef's knives. You aren't going to see a Kydex sheath on.
Yeah.
But we actually want our people to be able to travel with them.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So
that's one of the things, as maybe dumb or elitist as this sounds, that I started traveling with. Like I've got this, it's like a Carhartt tool bag.
Yeah.
With kitchen stuff in it, like when I go to Airbnbs and shit, because the knives are always just fucking horrible.
Yep.
Like I bring my own fucking skillet knives. Like I've got this little non-negotiables that it's like every Airbnb you stay at, that's just fucking terrible. And so I bring all my own shit with me. It's a pain in the ass, but because you obviously have to check that, but I don't give a shit, because I can't stand, I love being able to make my own food when I travel, but you got some Teflon fucking skillet that's half of it's missing, and knives that you can't fucking cut butter with, and it's just
exactly.
That's a fucking great idea. In terms of the sharpening, I know we talked about it, but it sounds like you would recommend getting a small set of stones and learning how to use them.
Yeah, we have a whetstone on our website. It's a work sharp stone, but we have a whetstone on there that for the chef's knives. I highly encourage people to go on and watch my video on how to sharpen, because it's different than probably you've seen almost anyone ever teach it before. Yeah. I actually go backwards on the stone with the blade, and it allows you to actually feel for that kind of wire edge and that little burr.
Yeah. It's on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, and so you have something that you can tangibly touch and feel and know, okay, I have a burr. On this blade, I've got a burr here, and then okay, there's no burr here. I'm not quite there. And, again, with that edge, say facing towards me, I'm pushing away instead of carving into the stone, pushing away. And what it's doing is it's basically creating that, it's raising that burr up on the opposite side. So if I go this direction, I can feel on this side, and you can really feel that burr. And once you've got a burr all the way along, that you've made all that progress on this side, so you can reverse the other side and go backwards on that side. And so everyone that I've taught that has seen that has really, it really strikes a chord with them. Okay, this helps.
And if you get that whetstone, I mean, you could use just that and put a good enough edge, or would you want to get different grits?
That whetstone is two-sided.
Okay.
And then we sell a leather strop that Francesca makes in Idaho. I would generally always finish with that strop.
Yeah.
Because that last pass, even on a very fine stone, will always, no matter how fine it is, it's always going to leave that burr a little off center.
Yeah.
And so that strop is going to take off a few of the loose little burrs, and it's going to align that edge. So if you imagine saw teeth that are straight up and down versus maybe laid over 20 degrees.
I got you.
Right. And that strop will help kind of align that and refine that.
Yeah. Awesome.
And I'll use, if I'm out in the field, I'll just reach down and I'll just use the side of my boot.
Really?
And strop it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Huh.
Yeah. I'm always wearing leather boots. And so, or you can take your belt off.
Yeah.
Just anything to strop it real quick.
Yeah. Fuck, that's super fascinating. Man, what an interesting episode, and one that, one of my best friends is a knife maker. I know several other guys that make them. To be able to kind of pick your brain at such a high level is really interesting. I mean, knives are something that I think most guys are into, especially in the law enforcement, military, first responder kind of space. Man's man type of guys, which is overwhelmingly the most of the listener base for the show are always into knives, and they're just they're fucking cool. They're primal. They're something that dudes have been into for millennia, so
I've heard a couple of those guys on your show, those knife makers, and my advice for the rest of your listeners that are buying knives, buy American. And then when you're dealing with those custom knife makers, like those dudes you've had on, don't try to negotiate the price, pay their fucking price. Like those guys that are doing that are generally not making a ton of money.
Yeah.
They're charging a fair price. That the hardest part of making a custom knife is actually trying to decide what to charge. It's, knife makers are generally trying to be so fair with their customer. Most knife makers are, I'm going to say it, they're fairly bad business people, and they're actually not figuring in their benefits for their health insurance, and they're not figuring in, some of their lost time, and they're not figuring in some of their research and development. And so, you'll talk to a knife maker and he's like, it took me this many hours. I'm making $40 an hour, making this knife. And then you ask them 4 or 5 questions about the rest of their business. And if they're factoring it in, it's like, no. And it's like, well, you're actually making about $20 an hour, maybe.
Yeah.
And I encourage people, like, yes, we sell knives, but like, buy knives from your local custom knife makers, especially the guys that seem like they're actually putting in work to do a good job.
Yeah. Yeah. My buddy Shane, I mean, he's been, one of my closest friends for 25 years, and he's been doing it for probably 10 or 12 years now, I think. And really all he does is custom stuff. But some of the neatest stuff that he does is like really niche custom stuff, like with ashes.
Yeah.
One of our close mutual friends, Glenn Doherty from Benghazi, who's, that's his hat in that case.
The Bubs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a kitchen knife at home that has a little, I don't know what the fucking material is, some sort of epoxy that's clear, but it's got a little window in the handle with his ashes in it. And then little strands of thread from his uniform, from his Navy uniform, that are like floating in part of that handle too, and he's made custom handles out of like the wood from a barn door from a barn that somebody grew up with or whatever, and now that's the handle of a knife. And one dog client of mine, his son had a parrot his entire childhood. The parrot lived 20 some years and passed fairly recently. Well, this kid had grown up with this parrot his entire life, and so he was able to make a stand and the handle have suspended parrot feathers like woven into them. It's beautiful work, and that's really kind of what he likes to do, and really all he does. He doesn't really make a ton of just standard knives. It's kind of his hobby, more than it is business, I guess. I mean, it is a business, but that's kind of where he shines and what he likes doing, and typically what he focuses on. But
he's making heirlooms that are going to be passed down.
Yeah, I mean, like that kitchen knife I have, I mean, that'll be in our family forever.
Forever.
I mean, it's got Glenn's ashes in it, so.
It's, there is something as a custom knife maker, and even with, with these knives, they're like a semi-production knife. it's cool knowing you're making something that isn't going to get thrown away.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know what it is about a knife. Same way with a gun, right? Like, let's say you have an old gun, stock's loose and falling off. The thing, you know, it's like, I probably shouldn't shoot this thing. It's probably going to come apart at any point, but you don't ever throw it away.
Yeah.
It kind of goes to the back of the safe or gets hung up or whatever.
Or get it refurbished, you know?
Yeah, get it refurbished. There's a lot of knives. People will break a tip off of a knife or whatever, and they've got it up on their mantle or in their safe. And there's something about not wanting to throw away.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, it's like even sometimes like an old axe head that the handle broke off, and people have axe heads laying around with the intention like, oh, someday I'll get an axe handle for it. They never do.
Yeah.
But they don't want to throw it away.
Yeah.
And there's something really cool knowing that we're making one of the very few things that in 6 generations from now, those knives are going to be around. And who knows who's going to have that chef's knife.
Yeah.
But that story is going to be being told for generations.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah. I agree. I love it. I think it's such a fascinating business you have and are in, and super impressive. Are you still doing custom work or
a little bit? I have one I just finished. We're gonna do kind of a fundraiser donation thing for the North Carolina kind of hurricane flood victim folks out of Elk Antler. So I'll be telling that story here pretty soon, but I don't get a lot of time just with how busy the growing the company is. But I'd like to do some more.
Kind of in that same vein, there's a bayonet, a Winchester bayonet from World War I on top of my coin.
I saw it.
That bayonet was given to me by a gentleman that owns Champion Choice Silver, which him and John Johnston, out a big supporter out in California,
Awesome.
paid for and had those made and designed them. Kind of
Awesome.
the cursory challenge coin that
thank you very much.
Commemorates the show. And then in that box, hopefully up in Montana, you can find an occasion or a reason to wear it.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, custom, again, something that's handmade, that's
awesome.
American, small, family-owned business that makes buckles Champion Choice Silver. They're here in Texas.
I'm going to the NFR Wednesday, so I'm going to have to wear it down there in Vegas. So.
If you could get a picture, or if we could get a picture, if you do rock it, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So, I appreciate it.
That's badass. Well, thank you very much. That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Again, thank you for coming. Such a fascinating story. I appreciate you taking the time. I'll be coming up to your neck of the woods here in the next few weeks, so we'll definitely have to link up, and I'd love to see the operation or whatever you have time for. I know you're busy, but
I'd love to have you stop by for sure.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So if I do that, maybe I'll bring a GoPro and we'll throw some of that on Patreon too. That'd be pretty fascinating, I think. But to you, the listener, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can choke yourself. Thank you for the support as always, and until next time, this is Mic Drop.